Welcome back to Dragon Army Books. My name is Dustin, and sometimes a book cover has a lot to say about the story held within the book. And sometimes the cover says absolutely nothing about the story. Either way, I am a sucker for pretty book covers, so I've grabbed a few that have caught my attention of books that I haven't read before, and over the next few minutes, I'm going to try my best to tell you what the story is about by simply looking at the book cover alone. So although I'm going to come at this with full confidence, I am most certainly, in most cases, going to be completely, utterly incorrect. If that angers you, turn away now. Or stick around and rage at me in the comments down below as we go along, because I am certainly about to butcher some of the stories of your favorite books. Okay? The first one is Shadow and Bone, the first book in the Grisha-verse trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. You'll see that it's a #1 New York Times best-selling author, and this was coming to Netflix. They've released the first series. Most of us fans really enjoyed the first show. I don't think they named it Shadow and Bone. It was named something else entirely. And it had a dark thing. And they were bringing in another book series by Leigh Bardugo that had to do with thieves. Now, by the cover alone, we see that it's just overflowing. Some would say superfluous with detail. We've got a buck. A deer buck with like water painted colors. And this honestly tells us a lot. See, most of you have read and or watched Harry Potter, and we've got animagi there, humans that can magically turn into animals. Now, this is set in London, or a version of London, and there are a subset of the humans that are able to shapeshift into animals. Our main character, our protagonist, you can't tell by the cover, but it's a girl, and her name is Krisha. Krisha is the lead character in the Grisha-verse, and I'll explain why it's Grisha-verse in just a little bit. But Krisha is able to shapeshift into a buck, which is a male deer, and she is able to go through the streets of London, or this version of London, in the dead of night, in the shadows. The crazy thing is, she's not an assassin. You would think she's an assassin because it is a young adult book, but she's not an assassin, and she's going around the streets of London-ish to reclaim the dead bodies of those that have been slain by assassins, because to turn into the buck, she must consume the bones of foes dead not by her hand, I think is what the prophecy was. Grisha-verse is because that's her last name. Her full name is Krisha Grisha, and the whole series is about her universe in London-ish. All right, we're 1 for 1 so far. Let's move on to the next one, which is Dan Simmons' Hyperion. This is a Hugo Award-winning novel. I know that this is sci-fi, and I've seen maybe that it's like a space opera. Again, it's a cover. At least I've got a little bit more details pertaining to the story, I would imagine, here on the cover. Does that say Satan Books? It says Bantam Books, which doesn't give us anything. But the cover assuredly does. We're on an alien world with trees that become double trees. That's when they're stacked on top of one another. You can see that in the image. And across that's a different kind of sea that you and I are used to, because this planet, the boats, it's a ghost ship, is sailing across the plains of this planet. And that construct, that human construct up front, is human-esque. That's certainly not human, because that is the antagonist of the entire series. This is a space opera, but it's more like space horror, and you've got this villainous creature right here that for the majority of the series doesn't have a name. I think they refer to him by things like the sharp one, the dark one, the mean one, is coming after the protagonist and crew. This vile creature is demonic evil, and for the majority of the series you don't know why it is coming after our crew. But here you can see him on a ledge overlooking our protagonist and friends on that ghost ship, and he's like, it's like, I'm going to get you. I'm going to make you have a really bad day. There's alien plants right at his feet, and that's actually interesting because it uses that as a poison and a sedative at one point, about 3/4 of the way through this novel, to knock out our protagonist and team in order to... The crazy thing is, it doesn't kill them. It tries many times, but when the team is finally in its clutches, it does not kill them. Why? Maybe because it's taking them to a planet named Hyperion. This is a lot more difficult than I expected it to be. I knew it would be tough because I know that a lot of books are just for flash and flare and to try to get you to pick them up as a reader, but we're moving on to, of course, a cover that says nothing about the story, but thankfully I've read it. Andrea Stewart's The Bone Shard Daughter. You'll see that Sarah J. Maas, who did the Assassin stories and potentially A Court of Thorns and Roses, she said, one of the best fantasy novels I've read in a long time, which is a very vanilla statement, but it means a lot. And Sarah J. Maas is the New York Times bestselling author. It's a very pretty cover, a very compelling cover, but again, it does not say much. We've got a red backdrop that is cracked and crackling up near the top or around the edges. And then at the forefront, we have this gate-like image that has a kind of like is that maybe an Asian-like city displayed as it flourishes up to the skies with the clouds, and underneath it with the waves and the waters, which clues you into something particular here. The city with which the fictitious fantasy city with which this fantasy story takes place is in an Asian inspired fantasy series where the mother is a bone shard, which is a profession. She's an assassin. The mother is the assassin. But we see this story through the eyes of her daughter, who is not an assassin, but when her mother mysteriously disappears, she must step into the shoes of her mother, use her senses like her mother had taught her, to be able to locate and find and rescue, hopefully, her mother from the clutches of the evil Foot Clan there within the city. Oh, I also noticed on the front of this crest are two dolphin dogs with birds on their nose kissing. The bone shard, there's a magical mystery to this story as well, and our protagonist Darla is what her mom used to call her. Darla has a pet companion from the murky water depth near the town, and it is that dog dolphin that is able to swim along when they're near the water and then run along when they're in the streets searching after their mother, the bone shard. 3 out of 3. We're moving right along. I'm going to make this a little bit faster because this is painful to me, and so I am confident that it's painful to you. We've got this one. It's Terry Pratchett's The Color of Magic, a Discworld novel. This is, of course, the first book in the Discworld series that is much longer than a trilogy. We're probably 12, 13, 15 books in now. It might even be like 30, but I've obviously just read this one, which I picked an interesting cover. Let's really look at this, okay? We've got these goblins. It is hard to tell what in the world is going on here. Okay, yeah, that chest has feet. A lot of feet. That chest is called the 100 legs. 100 legs. 100 legs, And it is a mysterious chest that really all of Discworld, the known Discworld, is searching for, because it is promised that there is tons of gold within. Now, this is like a fantasy comedy. The humor is ratcheted up to a 12 here, but we can see things like these are simple farmer crew. It's kind of like a D&D campaign a little bit, but we've got some goblins. We've got this hunched over, I think it still has its head. I think that red head is a part of that blue body, but they're all goblin-like creatures. And there's a scythe that is just out of picture, and then there's these ravens that are flying around. Not everything necessarily means something here, but the idea behind it is that this crew, this D&D-like goblin crew, is on a journey, is on a mission to find this 100 legs chest. Well, it looks like to me that they, of course, come across it, thinking that it's somewhat tame. Once they get it to their little hovel hole, they realize that it is indeed not tame. And this is the story of them finding, locating, and then dealing with the fallout of trying to take and steal this 100 legs chest. And this chest doesn't need a dragon to protect it. It's got its 100 legs. Moving right along to Brent Weeks's The Black Prism. Brent is, of course, a New York Times bestseller, and the subtitle here in the north part of this book, which that's how you describe cardinal directions, you typically use that to talk about book covers. Every light casts a shadow. The magic system here in this fantasy series is complex, and it does have to do with light. That's why it's called the Black Prism, because we're dealing with light. There's different spectrums of light, and based on what spectrum you're able to see, that's the magic that you can cast. Here on the front cover, we have Cargo, our protagonist, who is a young man, and he's an assassin, a street urchin. It starts off very tropey fantasy-like. His parents, not even in the story. He's just living on the streets when he realizes that he is the chosen one. And he begins to develop these magics, and he's actually the Black Prism. He's able to see a depth of black that the majority of people are not able to see, and so it enhances his magical ability. It's a very intricate magic system, kind of like Brandon Sanderson's here, and Cargo is really a compelling protagonist. Story-wise, it's fairly good. It's really just Cargo trying to survive, and then, like most fantasy stories, getting mixed up into a deeper subplot of, wow, the world is going to end, and I, Cargo, have to step in with my Black Prism abilities to be able to thwart the attempts of the evil god. And every light casts a shadow kind of hints at the idea that Cargo does for a little bit turn bad because he hates the system. He hates the system. Power to the people, or as they say here, light to the people. All right, finally, for 5 out of 5, we've got Steve Erickson's Gardens of the Moon, which is the first book. It's a tale of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I had to pause and stop there because, again, I've seen a lot of videos on this series, and a lot of fans like to say Malazan because that makes most sense to us. But the author has clearly stated that it is Malazan Book of the Fallen. And we can see the subtitle at the north edge of the book: a master of lost and forgotten epochs, a weaver of ancient epics. That's actually what Salon.com said. Salon, am I saying that correct? Salon.com, which sells not only books but hair products. Now, this cover actually tells us a good amount. Up north under that text, we've got this little kind of crest with a helmet that clues us in. We're talking kind of very stereotypical European fantasy flair, because I would give you the name, the actual like real name of that form of helmet that comes down around and protects the chin and the nose, but it would just bore you to get into the details there. And then from that helmet, we've got this little metal work there, which tells you we're at least into the industrial age. And then south under the author's large glowing name, we've got this castle, or this lighthouse. It really is a castle, but it is lighthouse-esque, and it is rising up with the moon in the background, the clouds even back, and then we've got these birds that are flying around, and one lit candle, it's not just a candle, sorry, it's a torch, up in that northern window. This tower is well protected, and it's really the final destination of our heroes in Gardens of the Moon. Now, by the title, you probably realized or guessed that yes, indeed, this is a book that takes place on a moon. It's not our moon. It's not the satellite that circles around. Does it circle around? It does. The Earth. It is a different moon altogether in a fantasy universe, but it does take place on a moon with a moon in the background, which is somewhat problematic, but this planet has multiple moons. And the gardens here don't necessarily refer to, see, this is what's creative with the title, doesn't necessarily refer to like the flowers and everything that's taken care of on the moon. The gardens is the name for the military force of the Empire on this particular moon. Our hero and team, most of them at least, come from the garden on this moon, and they actually have to make their way across the moon to this fortress in order to take it. Really, Erikson is a master of lost and forgotten epochs. He's a weaver of ancient epics, and this is one of them. It's the beginning of a very complex but well worth it read to figure out how our heroes in this unique setting. I mean, what other fantasy books are told on the moon that's not sci-fi? You tell me. This is straight fantasy. There's no sci-fi to it, but takes place on a moon. Erikson really is a master of lost. I've already said that. Lastly, the only thing that I need to tell you is what Malazan is. It's not anybody's name. It's really just the empire, the collective worlds of the known of this. It's the moons, the worlds, all of those things make up the empire of Malazan. Okay, I hope you didn't hate that as much as I did. I felt bad. But do let me know if you're a glutton for punishment and you would like to see more videos of this. There are countless covers of books that I haven't read and could make this a series. Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch and like this video. If you haven't yet, click subscribe, join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next one.